So welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute. Today we're talking about the 4 essential components to being an effective leader, and they are framed in an acronym that is going to make it very easy for you to remember. So thanks for joining us today. To current leaders, to aspiring leaders, to folks who've been doing this forever, for folks who are just getting started. Hopefully there will be a lot of value in today's session for all of you. I thank you for spending this time with me. When you get settled and are ready to go, the question for you to answer in the chat is, when you think of a TV or movie boss, who's the first character that comes to mind for you? So please let us know that you're here and who's the TV or movie boss that you think of. And we'll get started in just a moment. I want to thank you for being with me this week. This is a week of adjustment for all of us in varying ways, including me. So entering the live stream world has been something I've been avoiding and decided when is a better time but now. And I so appreciate your support and patience as I figure out how this works. I'm learning that it's hard to find Facebook Lives and people need a minute or two to figure out how to get there. I wish there was a way to send a link. I don't think there is, but if there is, let me know. I don't think there is. And yeah, we're all figuring it out together, right? So I appreciate the support and the ability to connect with you in this way. It's really different, not being face to face or body to body, I should say, but it's really wonderful to do this live. I thought about doing some pre-recorded stuff. I might do that in the future, but for now, I really want to try and continue doing this live to have that to be as connected as we possibly can. So it is Thursday and tomorrow is the last day of the work week when it comes to posting Facebook Lives. So tomorrow the topic will be on all things coaching. I am a certified coach and I get a ton of questions about what coaching is, what's it like to be coached, how do you become a coach, how can I use coaching skills with my staff or my clients. So if you are interested in coaching or learning about what coaching is, tomorrow is the session for you. We'll be back here at 1 o'clock. If you know anyone else who may be interested in that, please come back tomorrow at 1 o'clock when we will talk about all things coaching. But today we are talking about all things leadership. I love to talk about this. This is the bulk of the work that I do now. So we're going to go over what I have developed, which is the 4 essential components to effective leadership. So we're scheduled to be here about 30 minutes. I'm still working on the timing. But having it be 30 minutes means we won't have a great chance to dive so deeply into each area. But this is all good information for doing some further sessions down the road. This is also the work that I do. So I work with a lot of organizations and individuals to help develop their leaders through this model. So I'm so grateful for you to be here. Thank you for joining. Again, today's topic is lead with your mind, the 4 essential components of effective leadership. So again, my name is Catherine Spinney. I'm coming to you from Baltimore, Maryland. I would love to know who's here so I can welcome you, where you're coming from, how you're doing. And our kickoff question today is, when you think of a movie or a TV boss, who is the first person that comes to mind for you? So as I was preparing this presentation, a lot of people started popping into my mind because we have a lot of depictions in media and in what we watch about bosses. And a lot of them are not the greatest images of what a boss is, right? And there's something to be said for that. We'll get into that. But some of the people that came to mind for me, I was finding they were falling into these 2 big categories. So one of them is the boss that is this really terrible, maniacal, kind of devilish, mean boss. And this caricature of a boss shows up a lot in TVs and movies, where it's just a boss who is unabashedly not very good, who doesn't treat his employees very well, is very unethical. And then you have this other category of bosses who is sort of the incompetent boss, the kind of clown, foolish, buffoonish sort of caricature. So who do you think of when you hear the word boss when it comes to movies and TV? Some people that came to mind for me, a lot of them fell in that first category, which is sort of the evil boss, right? So I thought of Miranda Priestly right away from Devil Wears Prada. She's sort of the epitome of this type of boss, right? Demanding and difficult and unappreciative. Yes, we are going to get to Michael Scott because he came to mind for me as well, Shelby. He is actually one of both my favorite and least favorite bosses on TV for lots of reasons. But you have this Miranda Priestly kind of character. And Cat Grant from Supergirl. I don't know Cat Grant from Supergirl, Liz. So is she more in the category of the maniacal boss or the buffoonish boss, or maybe another character category? So other folks I thought of is like the Mr. Burns character from Simpsons, right? They intentionally make him really evil. And those of you who are Scrubs fans, like Dr. Kelso and Wilhelmina Slater and all these kinds of bosses who really go out of their way to make their employees' lives miserable, right? Then on the other side, you have these sort of buffoonish, not very self-aware bosses like Michael Scott. I think he's the perfect example, even if you're not an Office fan, which you'll have to explain that to me later on. But most people know who Michael Scott is. And he is sort of lovable, but terrible at the same time, just lacks complete self-awareness. My father couldn't even watch the show. He said he was like cringing on the couch watching the scenes, which is the point. And you have that Bill Lumbergh character from Office Space. If you haven't seen Office Space, it's 20 years old. It is as applicable now as it was then about life in an office. But you have the Bill Lumbergh character that just lacks complete connection and understanding with his staff. So this is not the case for every TV boss or every movie boss. There's certainly lots of other characters that we can think about. But I choose these two because when we think about leaders and we think about the leaders that we want to be, these are often what we see as examples, particularly that maniacal, evil, don't want to be that kind of leader. In reality, even though those leaders exist in the real world, in reality, what is happening more often is the sort of Ron Swanson Parks and Rec boss, which is the neglectful boss, which is the hands-off boss, which is I have other things to do boss, and I can't be bothered with leading my team. And this was my approach unintentionally when I first became a supervisor myself. I had just finished grad school. I got my first position. I was so excited, running a community center, running programs. And in the job description, the fact that I would be supervising other people was sort of like an asterisk to it, right? Oh, by the way, you'll have a staff. And through the interview process, same thing. We talked a lot about what I would be doing and what my outcomes were and what my expectations were for my programs, but really very little, if any, discussion about the fact that I would be a supervisor. I took the job and this held true. So that's how I started leading, right? I thought all about my programs all the time. How was I serving my clients? You might call them customers, clientele, however you refer to the people you serve. That's where my focus was. And the fact that I happened to be a supervisor was that I just happened to be a supervisor too. So I was extremely neglectful. My staff was doing their thing. I was doing my thing. I wasn't doing much leading at all, but I didn't really understand that I was supposed to be doing much leading at all, right? I didn't really understand what the role meant. And as you can imagine, it didn't go very well. So a lot of people I work with tell me they have this fear of being a micromanager. That's another term that comes up a lot. Well, I don't want to be the micromanager. And they calibrate too far the other way into this neglectful manager. So in the spirit of not being a micromanager, I'm just not going to manage at all. I'm not going to support and lead my team at all, which is no better than the other options that were listed there. So eventually I realized that neglecting my team was not working for anybody. It wasn't working for my team. It wasn't working for me. It certainly wasn't working for the clients that we serve. And so I realized that I had to figure out, one, what it meant to be a supervisor before I could dig into how to do it well. So one of the questions I hope to have you think about during our session and take it back with you is, what does it mean to you to be in a leadership position? It's a different answer for everybody, but how you interpret what your role means is going to impact the way that you do it. So think about what it means to you. Were you like me, where you just happen to be a supervisor and you go about your business? Are you really passionate and dedicated about your role as a leader and a supervisor? Do you really not like your role as a leader and supervisor? So those are important questions to ask. So we're going to look at the 4 main components that are necessary for effective leadership. Again, we have a short time together today, so today is intended to be an overview. And if you find value in the information, next week we're going to dig into each piece separately and how to continue to develop as leaders in those ways. So, the first area of the acronym, or the first term, it comes from the title of this program, which is called Lead with Your Mind. And MIND is the acronym we're going to focus on today. Those are the 4 letters we'll be talking about today that represent the 4 essential components of effective leadership. If you have some guesses of what each of those letters might mean, please feel free to drop your guesses, see how accurate you are. I did want it to be a nice, neat acronym, but it worked out perfectly because the first part of the acronym MIND, when we talk about leading with your mind, is mindset. So as a coach, and as how I operated before I was officially a coach, is the understanding that mindset is at the foundation of our leadership, as it is the foundation of everything else that we do. So how we process the role that we have as a leader and what that means to us is going to affect the way that we lead. And my argument is that all 4 parts of being an effective leader are important, but the mindset is the most important, because you can have all the skills in the world, but if your mindset is that as a leader, you get to be the one who makes all the decisions and tell everybody what to do, you're obviously not going to be a very effective leader. If in your mindset you view your staff as sort of collateral damage on your way to a higher position and more money, that's going to affect the way that you lead. If you always think you know better and you have all the answers, that's going to affect the way you lead. And so to be an effective leader, you have to examine, where is your mindset right now about what that means and what does that mean to you? Okay. You might have an understanding of what effective leadership is, but it's not something you want to take on necessarily. Okay. So that's an important piece of this puzzle. But to be an effective leader, your priority and your focus has to be on your staff. And this is a really challenging thing, particularly for people who work with clients who've been on the front lines of whatever type of work they're doing. And until this point, their focus has been on the client, right? Or the customer. That's always been their focus. And now all of a sudden they have transitioned into this new role, and it's hard to let go of wanting to continue to focus there. But that shift is necessary because now you are supporting the people who are doing that work. So I come from the youth development world. I've worked with youth my whole life. This is a really hard thing. If I have any other youth development folks out there, when I say to people in my trainings, your kids are not your priority right now, people are horrified, right? So I like the shock value because we need to jolt our systems a little bit to understand what that means. It obviously doesn't mean we stop caring and focusing on who we're serving. It means we're doing it now in an indirect way instead of a direct way. And we have to be able to make that shift. It's a hard shift, but that's our role, okay? That our priority is serving our staffs so that they are able to serve our clients or our customers. Also, a necessary component of effective leadership is that your role is not just to manage the day-to-day tasks of your staff. Your role is, as a leader, is to develop your staff and support your staff and give them what they need to do their job well. You have to have an eye for getting the right people on board. Once you get the right people on board, identifying what their strengths are and creating opportunity for your staff to leverage their strengths in every way possible. That is your role as a leader, and to give them the resources that they need. You are there to serve your team so that they can serve your clients and customers, right? This is not an ego trip. This is not about you. It is about what you are able to offer to your staff so that they can serve your clients well. So the next letter in Lead with Your Mind is investment. And investment means that in order for you to become an effective leader, and in order for you to help your staff develop, you have to invest. Okay? We have this mindset, we're going to go back to mindset a lot. We have this mindset when we promote people or we hire people whose role includes supervising others, that they can just sort of figure it out, right? Or that people just kind of know how to do it. If it's a situation when we're promoting someone, generally it's because that person is really skilled in the particular work or skill that they're doing. And as a recognition, as a way to appreciate them, we promote them and we leave them to kind of figure it out, right? Because otherwise they're really competent in what they do, so they can then figure out what it means to be a leader, which is absolute nonsense. Being a leader and supporting other people is a completely different skill set. Some people will adapt to it naturally, others will struggle more, but everybody needs support to do it well. And I use this example of like, if you're rolling out a new database or a new computer system or something to your staff and you just said, okay, go figure it out, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. That's not how people learn, but that's what we keep doing with our leaders, is sort of go figure it out. And the leadership in your organization is arguably more important than whatever database you're learning, right? It's like the most important thing that impacts how your organization runs, and we just leave it to chance that people can figure it out. Don't leave it to chance. Be very intentional about your investment in getting better as a leader and your investment in making sure you are developing and supporting your staff as much as possible. So when it comes to growth as a leader, this is another session we'll talk about next week. There's so many ways to go about doing this. And when we have so many options, it's really exciting and it's really overwhelming because people don't always know where to begin. When I decided to take my journey to become a better supervisor, I literally went to Arlington Public Library. I found the leadership section and I was like, thousands and thousands of books to choose from. Where do you start? Where do you begin? There's leadership courses and blogs and podcasts, and there's executive executive coaching, and there's all these cohorts of management training, and there's degrees and on and on and on. So where do you begin? We'll talk about that more next week. But the point today is to overview and get you thinking about what that investment looks like. And like all things, it's an investment that never stops. We never stop growing as leaders. We never stop learning as leaders. So how can you have an ongoing investment in yourself as a leader? Then you have to also have an intentional investment in your staff. Okay. Once they are on board from day one, what is their professional development plan? How are you supporting your staff in growing? That is your priority and your responsibility as their leader. And one thing I like to share with leaders and push them a little bit is that making sure your staff is doing their job well, that's managing well. And that's an important piece of what you're doing. Hey, Yolanda. But if you are being a true leader, that means that you are invested in supporting your staff throughout their professional growth, even if it doesn't feel like it's directly related to the task at hand. Okay. So one of the things that's really important for you to figure out when you're working with your staff is, what are their goals? What are their goals for themselves at this job and at this company? And what are their goals afterwards? There are some people who are going to stay at that same organization forever and ever and ever, but most people don't. Most people move around, and we sort of pretend this isn't the case, right? We're really scared to have conversations about people moving on. When we're thinking of moving on from an organization, we are really conscious not to share that with our supervisors, which is a shame. We know that people move on from jobs, right? So as a supervisor, think about what your staff's goals are. And if you don't know, that's your homework. Use this time to connect with all of the people you supervise and find out what their goals are. I've been working with an intern this year who is studying to be a social worker. So we had that conversation. I've had it many times. I supervise a lot of social work interns. And when I ask them what their goals are, they often tell me they want to be therapists or they want to open their own nonprofits. And this student told me that she is on the pageant circuit and she wants to continue to compete in beauty pageants. That's her goal. And it's not the goal I was expecting. And I'm so thankful that I asked. Now, I'm not a part of that world. I'm not able to necessarily offer her resources or advice in that area. But knowing that to be the case, I have my eyes open for when I see things and hear things about pageants. I talk to her about it. I ask her about it. She's still getting her degree. She's still interested in being a social worker. She's dedicated to that work, but she has this other dream and goal that she's really passionate about. And it is my pleasure to support her there. So find out what your staff is really passionate about, both at their current position and in the future, and do what you can to support them in their endeavors, even if it feels like it's not exactly related to the work they're doing now. I had a staff a few years ago. She was so great. I wish I could have kept her forever. I knew she wasn't going to stay forever, but she had shared with me that one day she wanted to start her own nonprofit. So I knew that meant that she was going to leave someday to start her own nonprofit. But I also knew that we wanted to keep her around as long as we possibly could. And what she would be learning in her quest to start her own nonprofit would benefit our organization while she was there. So I found a course locally. It was a 4-week, $75 adult community center learning sort of course about how to start your own nonprofit. I asked her if she would be interested. The organization agreed to pay for it. She was so thrilled with the gesture, with the opportunity. She took the class. She loved it. She stayed with us 2 more years, and then she went on to start her own nonprofit. So would she have stayed anyway? Who knows? But now we have provided another person in the field. It gives us a greater vision, right? That yes, we want people to perform and benefit our own little organizations, but we're also focused on the betterment of the field. So wherever we can work and support staff in their professional selves, with us or without us, it's still a net positive. Okay? So the third area that is essential to effective leadership in the Lead with Your Mind is necessary skills. And I added the word necessary, one, because I needed the acronym to work, but two, we cannot possibly be equally good and have all the skills that go into effective leadership. And I sort of wish, I'm still playing around with the acronym, that I could put this at the end, not because skills are unimportant, all four areas are important, but because when people are focusing on growing their leadership, that's the area they get stuck in. They want to talk about skills, skills, skills. So the people who reach out to me for coaching or for training and they want to improve themselves as leaders, they almost always start with skills. I need to figure out how to give feedback better. I need to figure out how to delegate better. I need to figure out how to have difficult conversations with my staff. I need to figure out how to tell someone that they're about to be fired, right? Or all these different skills. Skills are important. Again, skills are important, but if you don't have these other three areas, the skills don't really matter. When I was first coming out of college and I was about to be a classroom teacher, I was 22 years old. I was heading up to Richmond, Virginia. I just saw Dante in the room. Dante was one of my students, so he can attest to this. I was so young. I was so green. I was so not very prepared to be a teacher at 22 years old. And I sought out the advice of my parents, both of whom are school teachers. And my sister's on here. She can attest to this too. My parents have been married 50 plus years. They've made it work, but they are night and day and day and night, right? They vote different. They think different. Everything's different. And they're both teachers and they both taught differently. But when I sought advice from them as a first year teacher, they gave me the same advice. So then I said, okay, you guys can't agree on anything. So this must be true if you're both giving me the same advice. And it was that adage we hear all the time in the youth development community, which is, your kids don't care what you know until they know that you care. We say this a lot in the education world, right? This does not change when kids become adults. Your staff are the same way. They don't care what you know until they know that you care. So you can focus on your skills. You can be the most skilled leader there is. But if your staff knows that you don't care about them as employees and you don't care about them as people, then the skills don't matter. The other thing my mother had told me was, when your students know you care, and in this case, your staff, they're really forgiving, right? Dante's here 20 plus years later from when he was in my class in Richmond, Virginia, which is, yeah, I was a bit of a mess as a teacher. It was my first year. I was learning all the things there is to know about being out in the world as a first year teacher. But I hope and I believe what really helped me was I wanted to do it well. I really cared about my students. I really wanted to be the best teacher I could be for them. And so even though I wasn't the best teacher I could be, I was the best teacher I was at that moment. That's where I was in that moment in my very first year. But my students were forgiving because they knew how much I cared. Your staff is the same. If they know you care about them and you're maybe not the most engaging during a staff meeting or you're not the most organized when it comes to one thing or another, they're much more willing to be forgiving if they know that you are always putting them first. Now, it doesn't mean you rest on your laurels and you don't ever try to improve your skills. That's not the message I'm sending. But it's to say that the care and the dedication comes first. That's where we start. When people come to me to work with them, I say, I will work with you on skills, but not until we have the conversations about mindset and investment. One of the exercises I do when I work with groups on skills, on leadership skills, to prove a point is we'll have a blank list, 1 to 20, and I'll say, list the 20 skills you need to be an effective leader. And people can do it pretty easily. And then we have this collective challenge, do 10 more. Do 10 more. We'll see how many we can come up with. And the point is there's so much that goes into leadership. Okay, you can't possibly be equally good at all of those things. So what are the really important ones? Your communication skills, your ability to identify talent and support talent, your ability to give feedback and help people grow, right? So there's all kinds of assessments that can be done on leadership skills. We'll be talking about those next week as well. And then also the skills of your staff, in addition to doing your homework and finding out what their goals are you able to identify for every staff on your team what their strength is? Okay, because your role as a leader is to identify those strengths and leverage them as much as possible in how you utilize your staff on your team. Traditionally, we spend a lot of time on ourselves as well as our staffs looking at weaknesses. Now we call them growth opportunities. It is what are formally known as weaknesses, right? And we spend all this energy trying to get people good at things they're not very good at, or in our opinion, not very good at. And we neglect sometimes the things they're already good at because we think that we're done, right? We've checked that box. And it's backwards, because what we need to do is continue to invest as much as we can in helping them make their good things better, and to use those as much as we possibly can in the organization. And as far as their growth opportunities, yes, we all need to work on some areas we're not that strong at, but we also need to identify, one, we shouldn't be putting people in places where a good chunk of their job is things they're not very good at. And two, we need to identify some areas where we say, I'm just not that good at it. And I'm going to have to do this with someone else, or delegate this, or just throw up my hands and say, it's just not my strength. Okay? And finally, the last area, our 4 components of effective leadership, are D in lead with your mind, is desire. So it is important for you always to ask yourself how invested you are in what you're doing and what you really want to be doing. So my question to each and every one of you today, and one that I encourage you to ask yourself over and over again on your leadership journey, is, do you want to be a leader? Do you want to supervise other people? You might want to now, and then that might change further down the road. This isn't a question you just ask one time, but it's an important question to keep asking yourself, because much like the mindset, if you're in a leadership position and you don't want to be there, nothing you can say or do is going to hide that. People know when you are invested in them and in your position, and they know when you're not. So really assess your desire to be in a leadership position and pay attention to how that might change over time. Okay, so I'm going to take a breath for a minute and have a chance to recap. While I do that, I would love for you to share with us, as you think of those 4 components of effective leadership: mindset, investment, necessary skills, and desire. That's our MIND. Where do you think you're really strong in those 4 areas? You can just drop the letter and give a thumbs up or a heart or whatever. But where do you think you're really strong right now? And then where do you think of those 4 areas you really need to work on? So for me, I think my strength is in the D, in the desire. I think I've always been very invested in doing this well. I've spent the last 10 years working, researching, learning, growing, studying how to do this well. And that's why I'm doing the work I do now, is to share that, all of that knowledge and hard work with all of you. So my strength, I think, is really in the desire to continue to grow and figure out how to support other people in their growth. I think for me, the area I work on a lot is in the necessary skills. Some skills I know I'm really talented at, other skills I need to work on. So that's an area I continue to work on. So what about you? Where do you feel that you're really strong when it comes to either mindset, investment in self and others, necessary skills, or desire? And where do you feel that you might need some support and growth? I also would like to share that I have developed a self-assessment that looks at all 4 areas. I found in my years of study that when it comes to leadership assessment, they tend to focus on one area, generally skills, not always, but sometimes it's about like conflict resolution strategies, or the type of leader you are. But this is an assessment that tries to look at all 4 areas. So it is free, and I'm still working on it and tweaking it. I'm looking for lots of feedback on it. It's relatively new, but if you're interested in receiving that assessment, I am very happy to share it with you. So just drop your email in the comments, or you can reach out to me later. You can find me on Facebook, of course, or you can email me at Coach Kat, with a K, at katherinespinney.com. The cat is the K, not the coach part. Coach K-A-T. Someone can type it up for me if they would be so kind. And actually, Dante, who's here with us today as my former student and now dear friend, I attribute my nickname to him. I was a coach that first year I was a teacher, and he dubbed me Coach Cat, and I have held on to it. So Dante, I think of you all the time as my email address pops up. So thank you for that gift. So I'm hearing from Mariana. So strong on desire and need some growth. I hear you. Yeah, we all do. We all need growth in different areas. Devin, mindset, a lot of work with desire. Yeah. And part of what's hard to determine with desire is most of us, when we first start doing this, it's hard, which means we don't like it very much. And that doesn't mean we won't like it someday when we start to figure out how to do it well. But for some of us, we might not ever like it. And it's hard in the beginning. Devin, I know you're just getting started in this role. It's hard in the beginning to know the difference. Do I just not want to do this, or am I not liking it right now because it's new and uncomfortable, right? So I would love, bingo, there we go. So thank you so much for spending your time today. I would really love if you have some topics. My mind is swimming because there's always so many things I want to talk about, but I would love to hear from you what might be valuable for you. We're going to give this a go again next week. So if there's certain topics or areas you would like for me to address, I would be happy to entertain those. You can also reach out to me and talk offline about some other types of support you might need. And also, if you would like me to send you that assessment, I am very happy to send that to you. And hopefully it will be valuable to you in your growth. Thank you so much for being here. If you have some questions and you want to linger, by all means. If you are done with me for now, I appreciate your time. Again, if there's other people in your network who might benefit, this gets posted to my Facebook as soon as it's done, and I clean it up a little bit. I'm also doing a repeat performance, 4 o'clock on Twitter this afternoon. Same handle, Coach Cat 2017. So you can find me doing the same thing on Twitter at 4 o'clock. And tomorrow I'll be back